Let me turn on the light real quick. I don't know. There we go. A little bit better. All right. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully, you guys like my new hat. I just got that. So in this video, I'm actually going to tell you about my life and the things that I went through and the healing that I went through as well. For me personally, I could not overcome some of my past pain. And that led me to these wonderful healers. And then in return, it led me to, let me just move this a little bit. There you go. I'm like, can't see my face. So by being led to these healers, I in return got healed without me even remotely going there to be healed. It's quite a remarkable story. And I'm actually ready to share it. So I'm literally going to tell you the steps where I was, what happened, the results, and then I'm hoping at the end you will realize that the things that I chose to get certified in, I'm going to go through those and I'm going to give you my story of what was happening to me and why I chose to go get that healing. And then I chose to go any deeper because of what happened to me. I went to get certified because it works. Okay. So the very first thing that happened to me was, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 12 years ago. Wow, time flies. So what happened, what started me on my actual healing path, is the loss of my son. Now, on some of my videos, I kind of briefly went over that I was 5 months pregnant and I had a miscarriage. But I'm going to go into detail with that whole story. So, the very first thing I want to start off with was, believe it or not, I never wanted kids. And the reason why I never wanted kids was I wasn't raised knowing what love was. And my parents wasn't raised knowing what love was. And it was just, it's a vicious cycle. It's a family, if you are in tuning to this and you're feeling exactly what I'm talking about, you understand that there is no one to blame. It's literally family that we go through until someone breaks it. That's the whole purpose of a family bloodline. If it comes from very strong um, pains, so any type of abuse, you will realize that it just kind of gets passed down and passed down and passed down. And then eventually there will be one that was kind of born to break those patterns and to heal the family bloodline. So I'm going back to my story. So 12 years ago, I was, before I got pregnant, I actually chose a partner that was the complete opposite. I went with him because his family seemed so perfect. His parents was married and my parents were never married. So I always kind of wanted that. So when I met him, he was very sweet, very kind, and his family, it was just one mom, one dad. They had 4 kids together, and they seemed like the perfect family. Back then, I didn't realize that perfectness doesn't actually happen. Nobody's meant to be perfect. You can't be perfect. We're humans. We won't. As a human, you don't really want to be perfect. It would be boring if you think about it. So I met him and that's what attracted me to him. But I specifically said I didn't want kids, and he came as a very religious Catholic upbringing. So therefore, to him, kids is kind of part of the package. And I remember he said something to me, and that it feels like it was yesterday. He said, once you know who you are, you would want kids. So, one thing I can say is don't have your fear of your past or how you were raised in any way shape your decision of becoming a parent, because that is truly everybody who becomes a parent's different. I have 7 brothers and sisters. Out of the 7, oh no, I'm sorry. I have 6 brothers and sisters, total of 7 of us. And out of the 6, 4 of them have kids, and they're all raised them differently. So I thought that it's quite interesting to see it through my point of view. But then I have realized that, hey, if kids happen, that's great. But I'm also okay with it not happening. Um, I like the freedom that I have, and kids can be very freeing. Absolutely, it's always just your choice. But that's kind of what led me to not wanting them. And now as I stand as like, if it happens, it's great. If it doesn't, it's wonderful. That's what life is. It's not about planning. It's just about going with the flow. All right. So we were together for many, many years. We were engaged for 6 years because I did not really want to get married. um, as you can tell, one of the things I saw as a child was physical abuse. Um, and that was just with, my mom and the boyfriends or husbands that she chose. So therefore, marriage to me was never something I actually truly desired. And there's a more deeper feeling for me is that I can't see myself with just one person my whole entire life. That doesn't vibe with me. So if it vibes with you, that's awesome. You do what feels right to you. My whole channel is about being you. So all this is just my story of everything that I went through. Well, not everything, but the major shifts and changes. Okay. So after we were engaged for about 6 years, I finally said I would marry him, and we got married. And then that's when the whole having kids became a very strong topic around his family and around him. And so it was kind of like, I didn't really know who I was. So I realized in relationships, I molded myself. At that time, I did not realize this, but I molded myself to whatever that person needed. So I went ahead and I agreed to do this. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and try. So let me just lean down a little bit. Ah, there we go. You can see me better. So I went ahead and we started the process. It actually took over a year for me to actually get pregnant. And I think that had to do with we were trying way too hard. And once the funny story is, once we actually gave up on it, once it was like, hey, this is just not going to happen, that's when it happened. So, yeah, anyone who's struggling out there to have kids, the best thing I can tell you from my past experience is it's perfectly, do not put so much pressure on it. Just flow with it. Just flow with it. Okay. And if you're meant to be a parent, you're going to be a parent one way or another. So just go with it. That's all I'm saying. Just flow. It'd be way easier and you might actually have more fun. So back to my story. As I was getting, once I got pregnant, it was unbelievable because literally we basically gave up. And I came back from a vacation we had, and I felt very guided to take a test. So I've taken many tests throughout this whole year. So I'm like, whatever. I was like, I have one left. I might as well just use it. And he was at work. And when I took it, it was positive. And I literally asked my dog, Betsy, Is this reading positive? Like the dog could read a result and communicate, which they can communicate with you. But back then, like I said, I didn't know any metaphysics. I didn't know any of what I know now. I nothing. Sorry, I didn't know yeah, anything of metaphysics. I wasn't raised in metaphysics, so this the amount of knowledge that I have gained from there is huge. So that's where I was like in awe. So I called him because I'm like, I couldn't wait for him to get home. I was that excited. So I called him and I told him, and he went berserk. He was super over the moon happy. So then started a journey. Right away, being pregnant, I would get everything I used to eat, which I was not a healthy either. And sometimes today, I'm not. And I'm okay with that. But back then, eating was how I stuffed down emotions because I was not someone that you could even read what my emotions were. I had them so much stuffed and buried to keep myself safe so that I couldn't get hurt anymore. That literally you could not tell what I was thinking or feeling. That's how locked down I made sure I was. So, with that, I always ate the emotions. But again, back then, I did not know those reasons. I did not even comprehend that I was eating the emotions instead of just releasing my emotions. I was stuffing my face to stuff them down. All right. So, what happened when I was pregnant is I couldn't eat anything but salads. And I hated salads. So, I thought that was pretty like, wow, incredible of like, seriously? So yeah, salads. Um, it was a boy, and we did name him Lawrence. So I'm gonna go ahead and just refer to Lawrence at this time. So Lawrence wanted salads and only salads. If I ate any remotely fast food, I would throw up. Like, yeah, within a half an hour of eating it. So it was a whole shift of like, wow. So instead of gaining weight, I actually started losing weight. And then something happened to me. I would say probably about 2 months into being pregnant, I started having dreams about this little boy, a little tiny boy he wasn't old enough to talk. He was gorgeous, blue eyes, definitely had Jason's hair and eyes. And he would just come to me and he would just smile in my dreams. I did not connect the dots at all of who this was. Um, One thing that my family bloodline is that we are mediums. There's different levels to our mediums, but this whole family of mine, one of our gifts are a medium. And we're dream mediums, which means we can get a lot of information from the dead in our dreams, which it's more spirits. That's what they like to be called, not the dead. They like to be called spirits. I heal a lot through dreams because they come to me. Again, back then, I didn't know what any of that was. I just knew that many, many nights I would stay up not wanting to go to sleep because of the dreams I was having felt so real. I did not know it was actually someone in spirit or someone that was almost dying coming to me for help. Did not know that. So, back to my story. A little kid, maybe a couple months old, he would just appear and I would be holding him and he would just smile. And this happened throughout the pregnancy. One of the very last ones that I remembered was he laughed in that one. I went to sleep and I would have my normal whatever crazy dream that was coming through. And then all of a sudden, I would just be holding this kid and he laughed. And it just was very emotional. It was just the amount of love that was there was impressive. So, um, at that time, the whole pregnancy, I didn't have any real issues. Um, I talked to him every day, and I remember that. I remember just holding my stomach, and there's always like they can only hear you in the third trimester, but I always felt very guided. But I did notice that me and my husband was very strained. The whole pregnancy was very it was straining our relationship, not bringing us closer. It felt like we argued so much more. So then after an argument, I would go in and hold my stomach and say, I love you. I got very strong feelings that it was a boy, but we did not know the sex of it. We were actually going to find out literally um, the week after I had the miscarriage. We were going to find out the sex of him. But deep down, I knew it was a boy the whole time. Okay, so what happened the day of is basically I woke up at like 4 in the morning. I was teaching at my job, so that brought kind of a little bit of a stress level, but not really. Teaching and classes is just something that actually comes very natural to me. You get a little nervous like in the beginning, but once you just start going with it, you're okay. And that's the kicker. Everything that brings up a little bit of nervousness or fear, it's just so it keeps us stuck and we don't move. But anyway, so I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and my stomach was really, really hurting, like extremely bad. I thought it was something I ate. I was like, oh man, I was like, because the night before I didn't have a salad for dinner. I had something probably, I can't remember, but I do remember the feeling of like, oh god, I was like, oh, okay, he clearly just wants greens. So I tried milk because normally milk helped me to calm the stomach, and it didn't help. And it was just very bad cramping. And I was never pregnant before. So I just thought it would pass. And to find out, I literally was up for 2 hours trying to get it to go away, and it didn't. So at that time, I went ahead and woke up my husband because I didn't know what to do at that time. I'm like, I tried, it's not going away. This is really painful, extremely painful. I'm not one in the past to ever cry. It was not a thing. I always thought crying was a sign of weakness. That's just what I was taught. So you stand strong. But at that time, I just wanted to cry of the amount of pain I was in. Um, and so basically, I actually miscarried him at the house. He came out because I thought I had to use the bathroom, but it was actually him in the little sack. And then that's when my husband, it was great. I went numb. My husband stood up and he did what he needed to was to get me to the hospital. So I honor him that because I was losing blood. And when that happens to you, talking to any ladies who kind of probably went through this story, then you will realize that you're numb. You don't move. You're in shock. You're like, that didn't just happen. So we grab the Lawrence and he gets me into the car because he said he was no tears from him at all. And he was a very emotional guy. But he just stood his ground. He knew what he had to do. So therefore he went and he got me to go because he said, if you don't go in the car, I'm gonna call the ambulance. And I don't like ambulance. I don't know if any of you guys don't like them, but I don't like driving in them. So I went ahead and I was like, okay. I was like, let's do it. So he got me there really fast, like probably 5 minutes. Yeah, he went through as many red lights as possible. One of the things he said to me was like, now it's about saving you. Can't do anything about the baby, but now it's about saving me. So I thank him for that because if he wasn't there, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't be here. But that's not my story. That's not my life path. My life path was it happened exactly when it was supposed to. So now we are at the hospital. They rushed me back, and that's when, yeah, they take it. And once they basically, I went into labor and had him. That's what was happening. They were labor pains. Didn't know it. And then they got the rest, and then the pain finally subsided. They gave me some really heavy drugs. Um, and it just all still felt like this whole thing was a dream. It was a nightmare that I was going to wake up at. But a part of me knew that wasn't the case. So I knew my husband at that time needed to cry, and he just wanted to stay strong. So I told him, why don't you just go wash your car? Because he had a very nice car that he loved, and there was blood on it. I said, why don't you go do that? Because I knew he needed to release. He needed to cry, and he just didn't want to do it in front of me. He wanted to stay strong. So when he left, the lady came to give me the drugs, and yeah, some heavy drugs, by the way. So when he left and the nurse came, put the IV, the drug in my IV, and she left for a little bit, I strongly got that I was not alone. And my whole entire life, I always felt alone. But at that moment, I realized that there was people in my room that were not human. Like, it was a feeling of like love that I could never explain, but probably the love that I was always looking for. So I'm in a room by myself at the hospital, and I know for a fact that my son, Lawrence, was there. I could feel him. So it was my time to really talk to him. And the only thing that I wanted to say to him was, do not stay here for me or your dad or anyone else. Please go. Now, that is very important. The reason why is that kids do get stuck in spirit form because the parents tell them to stay. So if you ever had a loss of any type of child and you told them to stay, I would take a moment right now, close your eyes, and tell them, please go into the light. I have seen many kids in my journey of my medium and going to people's houses and businesses where there are literally kid spirits running around because someone told them to stay, and they were just being, they do what they are told. That's how little kid spirit stays. So heads up, one of the big things I want to stress is if you do happen to go through a loss of a child, if that is your path, as it was mine, please do not tell them to stay. They will always come in spirit, always. But when they're in the light, it's a very stronger feeling of unconditional love. Okay? So just remember that. Take that. If take anything from this part of my story, take that, please. Okay. So that's what I told Lawrence. He was waiting for me to tell him what to do because of the amount of pain, not just the physical, but the emotional pain. So here comes the nurse. Nurse comes in. She says, she goes over, and I said, can you tell me the sex of the baby? And she said, yeah. She's like, you might be too early, but let me see. And she went over there and she's like, oh, wow. Yeah, it's a boy. So congrats. Lawrence apparently had a decent sized penis. So when she said boy, I lost it. Tears were coming down. I couldn't control my tears. I didn't know where they were coming from. It was just me knowing that I was correct, that it was a boy. So here comes the next question that they ask you. Do you want to hold him? They ask, well, I would imagine they ask at every hospital. Maybe not, but I'm pretty sure it's always the parent. Now, my story, what was going in my head as I was debating back and forth, is that I didn't want the unknown. I did not want to walk out wondering what he looked like, what was his features, any of that. So that is your own journey. You cannot make any wrong decisions in all of your life, by the way. You cannot. So if you had a miscarriage and you chose not to hold the child, then that's your path and that's perfectly fine. That's what you needed. Me, I couldn't live with the unknowing. So, and it was part of something bigger. So I told her, I need to see him. I need to hold him because I would have too many unknown questions and I would regret not seeing what he looked like. So she said, okay. So she brought him over, handed him to me, wrapped up in a little blanket, and I freaked the fuck out. And the reason why was because that little boy staring back at me was who was in my dreams for months, just smiling at me. And then the very last one, he actually laughed. And I looked at her and said, is this some kind of sick joke? And that nurse looked at me like, okay, she is going through a lot. I'm not really sure what she's talking about, but she was like, I'm not really understanding what you're asking. And I'm like, I know him. He's been in my dreams. He's been in my dreams for the past 3 months. And she was like, okay. She's like, well, if you need anything. And I was like, no. She's like, I'm going to go ahead and leave you alone. I was like, okay. And she's like, I'll be back in a few minutes to take him. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. So imagine looking at a smaller kid that you were seeing in your dreams. It was mind blowing. I was speechless. I was just like, is this drugs? I'm like, is this really the drugs? Maybe it's the drugs. Because at that time, the drugs started to kick in and I was seeing some weird. Now, going back, I actually thought it was the drugs where I was starting to see like figures in my room and just like tons of lights and orbs and stuff. But now I'm realizing that that was all the people that was in there helping me with my journey. So yeah. Uh-huh. So sometimes it's not the drugs, but what the drug does, it calms your mind and it allows you to see everything. And now looking back, I've realized it was all my past family members. It was my guides. It was everybody there just sending me love. Like, you're okay. You're going to get through this. So the nurse came in and I gave him away. At that time, we didn't have a name. My husband came back and I told him, like, we need a name. And he actually came up with the name. Lawrence was, I think, an uncle of his that passed away when he was very little. So I was just like, that's fine. Like, we just needed a name, Lawrence. So that's his name, Lawrence. That's what we gave him. And yeah, so that kind of started a little bit of my opening of what's beyond the human form. It was already happening. It was just my son through my dreams showing me that I was actually a dream medium, that these horrible night terrors I would have, that I would not want to sleep, was literally people that had passed very, very badly, needing help because they were stuck. And that's why it felt so real. It's not them coming and trying to scare you, it's them giving you their story. And some of them, that's all they want, is just someone to know their story. Okay, so that was my big life change. The very first one. I went through many in 12 years, but that was the very first one. That kind of changed a lot. It got me on this whole spiritual path. Most of the time, when a life changing event or something like that happens, normally it's around almost dying or someone dying that we seem to open up to, like, there's got to be more. So, leading a little bit past that, after the loss of the son, the hardest thing for a relationship is the anniversary of that child. He was actually due literally a week after my birthday. And it was really interesting because at that time I was actually going to be turning 30. Um, no, that's not right. Forgot how old I was. Haha. I was going to be turning 26. Yeah. um oh no, I'm sorry. I actually gave you the wrong. This was not 12 years ago. Uh I was like it's really interesting cuz as I was going to be like uh turning 30, he was going to be 0, and then as I turned 31, he was going to be 1, and then me too. Him, I'm 32, him 2. So my bad. This was actually oh 9 years, 9 years ago. Yeah, this was 9 years ago. Sorry, not 12, 9. um, but yeah, so yeah. And isn't it funny in the beginning, you remember like the day, February 26th, it will be always a day. But each year it gets a little bit easier than the last. And then eventually you get to the point like I just did where I couldn't tell you how many years it was. I mean, how cool is that? That it doesn't impact me to go, this happened, blah, blah, blah. Um, but anyway, so prior to that, uh, me and my husband went through the very first year, and that was very hard. But one thing that also happened was my husband, they're Catholic, so they're not very open. Some Catholics are. I'm not going to put them all in there. But this specifically family was not open to him coming to dreams or anything like that. They just was like, okay. It's like he's gone. You move on. You don't talk about it, which I find interesting that miscarriage is such a negative word. So many people came to me at work after I had mine of like, "Hey, I had one too." And I didn't know because for some reason we don't talk about it. So, again, that's energy that needs to come out of the body, but instead we have shame in it. And yeah, I did probably what everyone else does. Once I lost him, I started going, "Oh my god, was I too stressed at work?" I know I was leading this classroom and teaching people forms. I'm like, was that, that I had too much stress? Me and my husband at the time was arguing a lot. Was that, I mean, you literally blame yourself and have this guilt of like, "Oh my god, what did I do to have this happen?" And the answer is you did nothing. It happened because it was supposed to. It was already written. Your soul already said, this is what's going to happen. And what comes out of it is the amazing story. What comes out of it? For me, something amazing on so many different levels. So, after my son has passed, we bury him. I feel him around. And I know this was different than in the hospital. In the hospital, I could not, it was a different it was a feeling of him asking me, "Okay, mom, what do you want me to do here?" This was a feeling of unconditional love. There was no, "What do you want me to do?" Instead, he was coming, sending me love. He was coming for me and my husband and just being with us. So throughout that, I felt sometimes when I was really sad and didn't want to get out of bed, that someone was hugging me that was really little, and that was Lawrence. He was just going, "It's okay. It's okay to spend a day in the bed crying. It's okay to spend two. But eventually, you got to get up. You have to start living. You have to keep going." So we went to one anniversary, and on that day or around that day, we both had dreams, me and my husband, and then this boy that was about 7 or 8 came in to both dreams. It was ironic. I knew exactly who that boy was, because I literally asked and he said, "You know me, I'm Lawrence." And then I woke up, of course, like, whoa. And then that morning, my husband was like, I had a weird dream and it was Lawrence. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I was like, because so did I. And we literally took turns describing the exact same kid. I shit you not, the exact same kid. I was like, do you now know? It, it's real. He's around, you know. But what happened literally after 2 years, I actually wanted a divorce. I was going through a lot of different changes. I was becoming more metaphysics. I was wanting more answers to the unknown, where my husband was okay with just being where he was, and he was supposed to. But for me, that was not my path, and we were just starting to separate. And as each month went, we went on more separate pages, more separate pages, and more separate pages. And then I finally got to the point where I told him that I needed him, I needed distance, I needed to see what this path was. And it led to him leaving. And I actually thought once he left, I would be sad and missing him. And it was actually the complete opposite. I was super happy. I felt free. And then I realized right then and there that this relationship, this chapter of my life is closing, which led me for my son. He became my guardian angel. Now, I didn't know about guardian angels. I didn't really believe. I believed in angels, but I also believe I wasn't worthy enough to talk to them, so I never did. But my son was very strong of telling me he was a guardian angel. And he was around me all the time. And he was. I felt extremely the most safe I've ever been in my life, to the point where I could have this conversation with my husband and let him know. And then I had to tell him, where I felt like I was the bad person, because I had to tell him that I wanted a divorce when I knew he did not, even though we were not the same two people we were when we first met, which actually was a 12-year relationship. There's the 12. But yeah, so it was a fight, the whole battle. But at the end, we actually came together and we agreed to just evenly, let's just get this done, and didn't have to go to court about it. One thing that came was, you never know. You always get what ifs. Like, if I had Lawrence, if he actually was living, would I have separated from my husband? Who knows? It wasn't my path. So don't ever go with what ifs, because it kind of gets you stuck, right? It gets you stuck in like, well, what if that happened? So always remember this. What if a frog had wings? He wouldn't bump his butt hopping. I mean, it's literally that. The what ifs, there's no reason. It does nothing. I need water. Hold on. Okay. So the what ifs, just stop. Everything happened the way it was supposed to. Everything did. Even the really hard things. Trust me, I've been there. Every type of abuse you can think of, I went through it. Some types of abuse more than once. So completely get the what ifs, but the best information I can give you is stop with the what ifs. Everything happened the way it was supposed to. Okay, so moving on. I am now divorced. I am now on my own for the very first time, because I've always lived with a parent or a roommate. And then I moved in with, well, my boyfriend and I, we got a house together. Never been alone my whole entire life. Thank God I had my dog Spots. And Spots, we did get him literally after Lawrence passed. And he was one of the greatest protective dogs. And I love him dearly. He's no longer here. He's on the other side. but he was my best friend, that dog. And I wasn't fond of animals back then, but yeah, that dog was very special. So here we go. Now I'm divorced. Now I'm realizing I molded myself to be whoever that person wanted me to be. I have no clue who I am. So I'm at a house that I knew. I got the house in the divorce. Um, so the house had tons of memories. And I'm here with my cool dog. I got Spots, and he got the other one, Betsy. So here are my cool dog, and I'm like, wow, what do I do? What do I do with my time? Like what do I do? Like I work, okay, I come home, what do I do? And that's when I realized I molded myself. That I had no clue what I liked, what I disliked, nothing. So, um, what I started to do was I needed answers. So, if you guys are in the Cincinnati area, you will know about the psychic fair that happens in April and I think November every year, minus 2020 and 2021. Don't think it was there. But, anyways, every year, April and November, there's that psychic fair. So don't remember how I figured out. I think I Googled psychic fairs or something like that because I needed answers. Just plain and simple. I needed the unknown answers. So there was the psychic fair that popped up. It was actually getting close to April. It was February just passed, so I celebrated Lawrence's B Day and D Day together. And then I went to see him. And then I I needed to do something. So I went to the psychic fair and I wanted to do a tarot card reading. Never have I done tarot card readings ever. This was my very first experience. I never played with them or anything like that, but I needed someone to do a reading. I wanted to know, was this legit? Was it legit? So I went through where tons of readers are in the psychic fair. If you guys ever been, wow, it's overwhelming, the energy in there. But I just looked at each one and then I found the one. She just stood out. And I was like, okay, it's her. So I went over to her thinking there was a line. No, she was like, actually, the person canceled. Oh, she's like, I can do you right now. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So I give her nothing because people, when you go to get readings done, or if you reach out to me, do my website about a reading, please don't give your information. You're actually kind of causing the flow of intuition to come. So if you do decide to do a reading with me, do not tell me your life story. Please don't tell me anything. Just tell me what I ask of you, then give me the answer. So I sat with her and I was like, okay. I was like, I know nothing. I was like, I don't really have a question. I just want a general reading. And she's like, okay. So I didn't tell her anything. The cards that she pulled, she knew that I lost a child. She knew that a marriage ended and that I wasn't happy in the marriage, but I wasn't sad. I was ordinary. That's what she said. It was just ordinary. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was just ordinary. And she was like, but you're on a huge change. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, but there's lightning, thunder. It was the thunderbolt. And if you guys know what thunderbolt is, it's the tower in tarot, which means something really dramatic is going to happen. But after, and this was my future cards, the 4, after the thunderbolt came all this awakening and opening, and she nailed everything. I gave her no information at all, and she picked up on all that. Do this card reading. So right there, I walked away of like, wow. I was a little nervous because like, oh my God, that card doesn't feel good. She's like, but you need it. And then a loneliness card came after. She said, now don't confuse this with lonely. She's like, you're not alone. You're choosing this. You're choosing to be by yourself for whatever reason. And shit you not, I literally chose to be by myself. There was another relationship that could have happened. Thank God it didn't, because it would have been worse than the one relationship with my husband. So I am so glad that everything lined up and I trusted my intuition that I wasn't going to do that. So I leave the psychic fair with a holy shit, readings work. And they do. Now, tarot cards just give you what your future path is on the path you are right now. If you change the path, then the cards are invalid. Just letting you know. All right. So, my one thing I'm going to leave you with, and then I'll come back and do my other second part. I had no clue how many parts this was going to be, but my story apparently is quite long. So this is all about my miscarriage, my divorce, and my very first awakening to the metaphysics world through tarot cards. So I was guided to go to Barnes and Nobles, probably a few weeks after her. And I went to their metaphysics area, right? It was time to get books. It was time to start to read something. And then I got it here. What happened was my son guided me to this. My very first ever card deck. And I do have a whole video on this Guardian Angel tarot card deck from Doreen Virtue. So he guided me to go to Barnes Nobles on that specific day at that specific time, look all the way up and to see this and to instantly buy it. And I had no, really, I had no desire on tarot cards at that time, minus just the one reading that I did. So him just communicating, this deck of cards right here, I could not put down. It was a link to my son, which literally told me that he was my guardian angel many years, a couple years before I got this. So that's how I kind of got started with tarot decks. Was my son Lawrence going through his loss, realizing he's my guardian angel. He was with me for a very long time until I was actually ready to fully go to something different. And then he was no longer needed to be my guardian angels. Quick thing on guardian angels, they can change. Some people have one, some people have two. But what I've noticed is that your guardian angels can change. So that's how I got into tarot. And I played with that deck and did tons and tons of readings. And the amount of information was amazing. And that was my very first step to the metaphysics world. It would not have happened if it wasn't for going through the loss of my son and knowing that my son was always around me. So everything happens for a reason. So stay tuned for part 2, where I go into my next journey of my life. You guys all have a wonderful day. I forgot to put on my links, but you can check out my website. You can email me at musardk05@gmail.com. My name is KellyBeeYou, and you are watching BeeYou channel. And the whole B as BEE is also because of my son. After he passed, I always had these honeybees would come and land on me no matter what park I was in, journaling, writing. A bee would always land on me, and I felt the same safe and the same love that when I knew my son was right there with me. So that is why BeeYou came to be. That's how it became a bee. All right, guys, have a lovely afternoon, and I will catch you later this evening on my part 2 of this fairly little mini video series called My Life. Thank you. Bye.